mynews.studio.
Two American aircraft carriers are now shadowing Iran, and there are open threats of war on the table. The question is, will these high-stakes talks in Geneva defuse the nuclear crisis or make it worse?
Today's date is February 26, 2026. Let's set the stage. The US and Iran are back at the table for another round of nuclear negotiations in Geneva. This is their third major meeting, right?
Yes, that's right. The first two sessions were held in Oman and in Rome, but this time the stakes feel even higher. The US has positioned two aircraft carriers close to Iran, and that move isn't exactly subtle. President Trump has issued an ultimatum. Iran must fully dismantle its nuclear program or face consequences.
When they say dismantling, what does that actually mean? The US wants Iran to stop all uranium enrichment and close down its main sites, Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan. But Iran keeps saying enrichment isn't up for negotiation. Why is that such a hard line for them?
Iran says it needs enrichment for civilian nuclear energy, which it describes as its right under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The US counters that any enrichment ability leaves the door open to weapons. Iran's latest offer is to scale back enrichment from 60% to 3.6% and suspend it for 7 years if they get sanctions relief and can export oil.
But the US wants more than that. They're also pushing for an end to Iran's work on ballistic missiles, and for Iran to stop supporting groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. Is there any indication Iran's willing to budge on those points?
Not completely. Iran's leaders have refused to dismantle everything. They're pushing for access to frozen assets, normalization of banking, and crucially, guarantees that the US won't pull out of the deal again. They've also called for Israel's nuclear arsenal to be addressed, but that's not on the table for Washington.
The US response seems divided. Steve Witkoff, the envoy, has shown a bit of openness to Iran's compromise, but senior officials like Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance are skeptical. They point out that Supreme Leader Khamenei isn't directly involved in the talks. Does that kind of skepticism change the dynamic?
It definitely does. Without Khamenei's direct approval, U.S. negotiators question whether any agreement will really hold. Plus, the U.S. is demanding snap inspections from the International Atomic Energy Agency, surprise visits to Iranian sites. Iran sees these as intrusive, but the U.S. insists they're necessary.
Let's step back for a moment. If these talks fall apart, what's actually at stake? Are we looking at a real possibility of war?
Yes, that risk is real. If diplomacy fails, there's talk of U.S. or Israeli strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. That could shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which is the route for about 20% of the world's oil supply. The immediate result would be higher oil prices and global instability. And as Iran feels cornered, it might actually speed up its nuclear program.
If a deal is reached, Iran's estimated breakout time for a weapon could be stretched to a year or more. Right now, it's only a matter of weeks. That would ease the risk of Iran getting a bomb, steady the oil markets, and reduce tensions in the region. But if talks collapse, we could see nuclear proliferation. Other countries might try to build their own deterrence.
There's also what's happening inside Iran. The country's been hit by campus protests and ongoing economic trouble from sanctions. That's pushing Iranian officials to demand more economic relief, especially more oil sales. Ironically, the unrest could make them less likely to compromise, unless the benefits are obvious.
What about outside mediators? Oman's been quietly helping as a go-between, and the IAEA is supposed to check compliance, but Iran isn't making access easy. The Europeans, who are part of the 2015 deal, are under pressure from the US to reimpose sanctions, but they're also worried about the talks failing.
So, what's happening in Geneva isn't just about technical nuclear details. It's about the risk of military conflict, the stability of global energy markets, and whether international arms control can actually work. The question is, will diplomacy win out, or are we heading toward escalation?
It's a turning point. What happens now could reshape the Middle East and the world economy for years to come. But are both sides actually prepared to accept the tough compromises needed?
That's what it comes down to. Both sides have demands that might not be compatible, but the alternative is risky for everyone.
We'll keep tracking this story as it evolves. Thanks for joining us for this in-depth look at the Geneva nuclear talks.
If you want to make sense of the headlines, keep tuning in. Thank you for listening. This episode is brought to you by mynews.studio. You can try it now, free of charge.